Okay, this is an introduction to the second part of the financing video. Now, in this part, we've completed the profit and loss statement and we walk down to the cash flow statement. Most of this is getting CapEx. Most of this is just going and connecting variables, connecting CapEx, connecting EBITDA, connecting working capital changes. So most of it's going up and down. There'll be a lot of up and down in this video that I apologize for in advance. Um, there is some little more complicated things. Okay, one of the things is we say, well, we have to find how much the financing their need is, and we test this thing and see if this thing is negative or positive. That's how we get the amount of financing. And then when we go to the cash sweep, use a minimum combined with a maximum. You see, you're only going to sweep if it's positive, but you're not going to sweep. The cap, when you say minimum, you could almost say cap, is from the amount of debt that's outstanding, and you're going to almost do the same thing with the cash balance. You see, if there's a shortfall required up here, then we have to put the cash on the balance sheet. And uh, there are a couple of other things like that. I'm sorry, the cash fall, we'll fund some of the shortfall with debt and equity and all of that. And then finally the dividends. So the last thing, and then the balance sheet will again just be linking upstairs, going up and down. And this will be a balance sheet with all equity first and then a simple amount of debt next. Okay? Okay, so we have finished the profit and loss statement, and now the cash flow and the balance sheet are left. And the other thing that would be nice to look at is to see what happens if we change the debt, the equity percent from 100% down to zero. So the idea is to go and balance the balance sheet. And then once you've balanced the balance sheet to see with all equity, then you put debt in and see what happens. Now, I think one of the biggest problem is going to be all this profit and loss. Somebody told me, which is quite true in this kind of financial modeling business, you get finished with about 95% of the model, and it's that last 5% that completely drives you bonkers. Okay, so let's just fill in this, and that's going to be circular references with IDC in this situation, I think. Now we just put the taxes paid, so we have the EBITDA and the taxes paid, the working capital movements we've already got computed. And that is up here. Okay, and the idea is just to look and find where all these things are. Now, it would have been extremely easy to forget the interest income. In fact, I'm saying that because I did when I kind of did this alone as a practice. I'm working so hard on these videos, I'm practicing before I do them to not embarrass myself quite as much. So we put the idea is to put the all of the positive and numbers. I put them in as positive numbers. How's that? And the development expenditures, that's our company's own development expenditures. But uh, the capital expenditures have been defined up here in the why am I stuttering so badly in the pre-cash flow? Now the IDC and the fees, well, we have the I'll take this from the IDCs and the fees we put in this balance. Now that's going to be zero at first. And for right now, we're going to leave them as zero. So then take the last subtotal and subtract the rest of the stuff. Okay. The cash shortfall at this point is a little bit different. Perhaps there's something up better to do this. And this is a danger of circular reference. And I'll tell you why. We've got some taxes up here. The taxes depend on the interest. And the interest is defined by the debt financing. So there should be a circular reference. But for now, we'll just go up to the past the profit and loss and get the total equity contributions, and then we'll go to get the debt contributions. Okay, and a circular reference we'll deal with a little bit later. The interest is the interest expense, and we can take that straight from the profit and loss, I think. And then we have another subtotal, and the subtotal, I just add these things. Okay, that's pretty boring. It's really kind of easy. Now, the amount, when there's some additional cash available, okay, I can make sure that cash is positive, okay? Now, but the amount of the cash we're going to put in our account is how much we actually need to put in. So that's this thing we did up here. I can say we this time, and this is the cash flow shortfall to be top up. That's kind of a bad title, isn't it? Okay, and I will change that. And that gives you how much cash we've left over to sweep. And I said, well, this is kind of easier to do a cash sweep this time. So let's sweep all the cash flow before we allow any dividends to happen. And when this is done, you have to make sure that you don't sweep more than the debt. Otherwise, there'll never be any equity. So on these kind of minimum statements, they're not kind of, they really are minimum statements, take the opening balance and see how much you have left to do. Now, when there's stuttering again, when there's a payment, a fixed payment, this might have to be changed. And then the remainder is just the net cash flow, and we're just going to pay that out. Okay, and to see if we have any circular references, I'm going to calculate that. Oof, so far so good. That's actually pretty good because we're all the way down to the cash flow statement. And now let's do something really exciting. Let's go to the cash balance. Let's go to the accounts receivable balance. Okay. And then let's go to the construction work in progress balance that we computed here. And then the plant in service balance, that was computed just near the depreciation. The accumulated depreciation should be right near the depreciation analysis, and make sure and take the accumulated depreciation, not the plant balance. Now the balance of this construction work in progress is here. You notice I haven't summed this, and then take the accumulated depreciation from this. Now on the accumulated depreciation, I'll put a minus sign here, and let's put a minus here, and then press alternate equal. The other side, again, this is the rule. You see the rule. I should have been much clearer about this, but the rule is to take all of these closing balances. And hopefully I've even put underlines around a lot of these ones. Okay? And the equity balance is a little bit of an exception because we haven't got that. And the reason we haven't got that is you cannot get the equity balance until you know the dividends and the equity contributions and the income, which are part of these statements. So let's get the uh, 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 the equity contributions and then get the dividends. I said the earnings, excuse me, and then the dividends. So those are the last two lines of these other statements, and then take the opening balance plus the equity contributions plus the income minus the distributions, and then just press alternate equal. Now, we can take the difference between the assets and liabilities and put some kind of thing to make this equal to 0. That won't work, by the way, because there'll be some rounding. There is always some rounding. Now, before you, I certainly would have the calculation option set to still manual. It's still to manual, okay? Let's select the whole thing all the way down, and then press Shift Control R, and it goes fast if you don't have to make all those calculations. Now the this is I for this is ridiculous. This shouldn't be I. This is we should put an and here. Now, if you notice something, maybe you notice that I'm really afraid of this. I'm sure the balance sheet won't balance, and I'm afraid of all this. So we're going to go to the formulas. I'm still afraid of it, and I'm going to press calculate now. And we've got false. Okay, and the problem is, one of the problems is we have a negative CWIP, the construction work in progress balance. And the one thing I don't want you to do is watch me struggle with all this. But let me tell you the idea. The idea is to go, well, you see this is wrong. Clearly there's something wrong here. So you just first would go and look at this. So I of course made a mistake on purpose. Opening balance, add the construction, and the plant placed into service is clearly something wrong. We should have taken the plant that was actually placed into service. Hopefully I made an error there, and this should have been 253, and for some reason I used 100, but maybe that was just from another place. I'm gonna calculate it. Now what we had here is we have to look at this. The capex sound wrong too, and I think what I'm going to do is stop here. Okay, and you don't have to see it. Okay, it still didn't balance. I didn't really expect it to balance. There's something wrong with the plant in service. Okay, and I'm gonna go ahead and come back to you and say, oh, it's all magically balanced, but it'll be kind of BS. Now, that really wasn't that bad. All I had to do, I swear, I'm not lying, I just had to fix I took the wrong lines for CapEx on the QUIP, on the construction work in progress account, okay, and now it makes more sense, and that was when the balance sheet really wasn't balancing. Now, if we go across and see why it's false because there was some really, really small numbers. So to fix that, we could put a round and put comma, let's say 1. Okay, shift and then just I'm calculating it again with a sigh. Okay, and now everything's okay. But don't get so excited. That wasn't supposed to be very hard because we didn't put any debt yet, and the debt is what can really drive you crazy. Okay, and I've got to stop the video here because somebody came into the room. Oh no! Now, when we here's what I did. I should say use the past tense, I guess. The I just put one single facility in, and I assumed that it takes 10 months to construct. Okay, and then um, put only 10% equity funding, so the rest is debt funding. Okay, now how about this? I'm going to remove now the right now the balance sheet balances. This is a major kind of victory. Let me kind of why don't we go through this a little bit slowly? So we have the total amount we fund, and 10% comes from equity, 90% comes from debt. The debt builds up and then eventually pays down. Now this is going to be a problem if we have a negative cash sweep. We'll address that a little bit later. I suggest you do one thing at a time here. And then we determine how much of the interest here is capitalized and expensed, and correctly the interest is capitalized until you begin operations. I don't know how to prove that this is when you begin operations. And I had to change something. I'm admitting here. This has to be the opening balance, total opening balance, uh, to really allocate the interest during construction and the interest expense correctly. You need the opening balance. Then we have a cash balance that never, well, that's not quite true. We have some positive shortfalls, and we've got to make sure that that gets put into the cash account. Okay. We might want to look forward for this. I don't think that would be that big a deal, by the way. We'll correct the cash balance just in a minute. Sorry about the sigh. Okay, and then we have nothing on the profit and loss until we start um, the thing. I don't know why there's a tiny little bit of negative here. Okay, and we don't have any. Well, yes. Look at this. We have a little bit of tax loss, but we'd have to really be careful about that tax loss because uh, taxes wouldn't really be paid monthly. Okay, now I put the interest during construction as a minus. Now, if we didn't do that, you see the balance sheet wouldn't balance. Okay, so step one is to make sure that you account for the interest during construction somewhere. Okay. And the really, really good news about this, and then after you after you have the excuse me, the interest during construction accounted for, make absolutely sure that you account for it somewhere on the profit and loss statement. Okay, and then we have the depreciation and accumulated depreciation. Okay. There is one little thing that should be changed on here, by the way, and that is that we should use some sort of ratio. Excuse me, I can't even find this now. Uh, this should be the IDC. I'm sorry. This IDC should not be the amount you take. We shouldn't have really started the depreciation until this period. Actually, that's what caused a little problem in the profit and loss statement. Okay, I think I'm going to add that at the very end here. And I think I'm not even going to put that one in the video. Okay, you can look at the file for that one if you really want to know it. That's what's causing this little stuff here. Okay, now so far everything is kind of really okay. That's amazing, really. We can put some equity outputs now. Now if we, oh, come on. We can put cash inflow, equity cash inflow, and then equity cash outflow. Okay, and then we put net equity cash flow. Now, and then finally get equity IR. Now, I don't usually do it like this, but I think it would be fine to take the inflow from the dividends right here and the outflow from the equity contributions. And then we take this one minus this one and shift control R, and we can do the same kind of thing we've been doing and get an IRR. Now, again, for some reason, when you have these kind of monthly ones, I put 0.01 here. Okay, and then we take this one plus that, raised to the 12th power minus 1. Now, it looks like, okay, so we have a 26% equity IRR when we do all this. Okay, not surprising given the project IRR and the cost of the debt. We could also put debt, cash inflow, and debt cash outflow, oh shit, oh no. And then I'm going to, but I'm not going to do that right now. I'll do that outside the video. It's just the debt cash outflow is all the draws you make, the inflows, the fees, plus the interest, plus the repayments. Okay. And we can get net debt cash flow. And we can get debt IRR. Okay. You'll see that in the model in just a minute. Now, the thing I haven't done yet is put the fees in, and I'm a little worried about that. I'm very nervous. Oh, I hate this. Okay. But if we can get the fees in, we can essentially say, well, this model is really, really kind of finished, and then we can do a little bit of our sensitivity analysis here and see what happens over here to the project IRR. Okay. And then we can put the equity IRR and, you know, okay, we can do all of that. Notice how I'm just not, this is ridiculous to be this afraid of fees. But let's put put these in. Okay, now, okay, we go to the financing analysis, and then we have the fees on the debt, which Okay, so now we have the fees. Now, the reason the fees aren't unbalancing the balance sheet is I didn't put them either in the cash flow statement or in the balance. Now, just to illustrate how this would work, is you put the fees up here. Okay. Now we put that in, and then we make sure and add the fees to our balance. Now, if you ever put something on the balance sheet like this without reflecting it in the cash flow, you're going to have a problem. Okay, I'm going to save this. Whenever you think you might have a circular reference, I suggest saving it. And then we put the fees down here. Okay, and I'm going to take them from here. It really doesn't matter. And then we finally have a circular reference. Finally. See, I was nervous about this. And the good news is we kind of saw it coming. Okay, now the fees here are driven by the fees are driven by the financing, but the financing is driven by the fees. We could do two things. We could make a function, but the first thing to try, frankly, is to take the fee rate and say, well, this assumption said it was in arrears, and just make the fees make kind of a little bit of an exception. There's just such a minor item anyway. Okay, and so we just delayed them once. Now, just a minute. The really good news is the circular reference went away. Okay. Now I have to copy this across to see it's still going away, and that's pretty good news as well. And this seemed to be copied, and we have a balance sheet that's balancing. So I'm going to stop here, and I think that's really good enough for a model. It illustrates this. If you really wanted to solve the fees, it wasn't the blue arrows. There weren't a whole bunch of complicated blue arrows. You could have written a function for this. That would have been a whole lot better than trying to deal with uh, deal with some big copy and paste thing that you'd have to do all the way in the bottom. Okay, and maybe I'll have a addendum for this. Now the rest of this is going to be a little bit of scenario analysis and presentation, but the big thing is that the model is finished. Okay, and that's that for that video.